Committed to using strip till on all their sugar beets, corn, and soybeans. The end result has been farm costs drastically lowered, several pieces of now unnecessary equipment offloaded, fuel and labor costs reduced, and no hit to yields. The Ryberg operation now also includes interseeded cover crops. It's a quote from Brian: "When you want to make improvements, the mechanical, physical part of it is easy. It's a mental aspect that's sometimes tough to grasp and commit yourself to believing it's going to work." And I think lots of people have thought that here too. Join me in welcoming Brian.
Good morning, everyone. I'm about 900 miles west of here, a little bit north, so a little trip here, but my connection to getting here, Mike Verdonk and I worked together at the Commodity Classic, I don't know, 2-3 years ago in San Antonio, and met a great guy, and we've stayed in touch. And so it's like many of you that I've met here in this conference, it's nice to network with people that share similar values and ideas. So we'll get started here. So this is where we're located in Minnesota, about 75 miles west of the Twin Cities. Obviously where you come from you think is God's country. We farm in very fertile soils, heavy black soil, 2-3 feet of topsoil, very good organic matters. We have some peat soils that are up to 12 organic matter, so we don't have any issue there. So some of the things we've done and we've changed, we haven't necessarily done for organic matter because we've had a pretty good level already. This is my crew. So we have 6 kids. My wife Sandy, she's an advanced math teacher, so you know who does the books in our operation. I'm not allowed to touch the checkbook. My son and his wife are on the left of me. Ethan came to me when he was a senior in high school, and he always helped on the farm, but he didn't necessarily love it, and I could tell that. He said, "Dad, I don't think I want to farm." I said, "That's okay, you got to do something you love. What are you thinking?" He said, "Well, I'm trying to find a job that I can work the least and make the most." He's a pharmacist, so he's doing well. They live in northern Minnesota. We have my pointer working here? Well, you can pick them out. We have 2 adopted daughters from Korea. I joked one time in front of my wife that she had 2 affairs. That didn't go over so good. So. And the good Lord blessed us with 3 more girls, and he and I had to have a talk and say, all right, this is enough, I'm outnumbered. So, looking forward to son-in-laws, so we're waiting for the ring from the gentleman to my right up there, anxious to have him for his son-in-law. So that's, my daughter's waiting just as anxiously as we are. It's my dad. Of course, we all look up to our fathers that got us started, and it'd be very difficult without him. My dad was always an innovator. Sometimes I question what the heck we were doing when I was young and trying to figure things out, but one of his best friends was Dick Loftus. Some of you might know Loftus Manufacturing, made snow blowers, stock choppers. So they've been friends for life. They actually live side by side on the lake near us for the last 35 years. Those 2 get to drawing on the back of a napkin, and he shows up with a bundle of welding rods. There's trouble at the farm. But we've tried a lot of things. Some of them ended up in a scrap iron pile, but some actually worked. And so it was always pretty easy for us to adapt to change, where some people struggle with that. I remember many years ago, we raised corn, soybeans, and sugar beets, and we'd work that sugar beet ground, just scratch it lightly with a field cultivator, and come the next spring he'd tell me, "Why are we working this again? We should just no-till it." And I said, "We can't do that. Nobody does that." Well, he was maybe thinking ahead of us. So, lost my mom 3 years ago for a 10-year battle with Alzheimer's. That's a horrible disease for anybody to watch, and so obviously we miss her. But my dad actually just got remarried, so there's always hope. So he's 85 and doing well. He's got life figured out. He golfs 5 times a week. and still comes out and tells us what we're doing wrong. So these are my guys. My nephew Chris is in the middle. We don't clean up very good in that picture, but Chris has been with me for 9 years, grew up on the farm. I had a four-wheeler and his parents didn't, so he was out there when he was pretty young, chasing around. Jason on the right there has been with me for 17 years. He's our operations manager. He takes care of all the shop stuff and gets things ready. And Chris is our techie guy because I'm not very good at technology, and I kind of pick up the pieces wherever it might be. But I couldn't do it without these two guys. I treat them like partners. We go over all the decisions together, and they're awesome. So they both run planters in the spring since we don't do any spring tillage. Jason runs our combine in the fall, and Chris runs our strip till rig. So our transition actually started with cereal rye, just looking for something to spread on our sugar beet ground. We had some open winters, we'd get dirt moving, and I just didn't like that. And so we started just broadcast cereal rye right after harvest, and had really good success with that the first couple of years, and thought, well, this is easy. Why haven't we been doing this? The last few years have been a little bit more of a struggle because our harvest has gotten later, and we haven't had the warm fall. But so then we started looking at what we were doing to our soils, and I'll get some pictures here coming up. But our aha moment I shared with somebody last night. So we rent about 75% of the land we farm, and we had a long-term rental deal with a family and worked together very well. And they had this odd-shaped grove that was just kind of a pain in the butt to farm around, and some pasture land. And so I offered, at that time we had an excavator, I offered to take these trees down if we could square this up. And it wouldn't cost them a thing, so of course they obliged. So we took these trees down, and the next June we planted corn through there, and of course you always expect a couple years for that soil to kind of get reshaped and productive. And this pasture land, the end of June, the corn was 6 inches taller than the rest of the farm. And I'm looking at that thinking, what are we doing wrong on the rest of the farm that this corn looks so much healthier? So that kind of began the thought process of what we're doing to our soils, and started asking some questions, and knew we couldn't just jump to no-till, and so the strip till thing came to mind, and yet we looked around our country and nobody's doing it. So with a leap of faith, I contacted ETS Soil Warrior, and after doing some research, the guys in Iowa, we decided that's the company we want to try because they're close, they're 75 miles away from us, and they're one of the few companies that made equipment for 22-inch rows that we're in. So they brought us out a unit to demo a couple days right before it's going to snow. We had a shank machine. We had troubles getting residue through that shank machine, through the corn, and so we dropped the shank, ran a single wavy coulter with the intent to plant beans into it the next spring, so we knew it was a little more forgiving. I went past the field after my nephew's running this machine, and from the road I thought, what are we doing? You couldn't see a strip out there at all. In fact, the landlord called me, and after it snowed, he said, geez, it's too bad you didn't get the field worked. I said, well, no, we actually did, and I explained what we were doing. And by next spring, that black strip was just as apparent as could be, and we planted beans into it, and we were hooked then. We knew this is what we wanted to do. We have the good fortune, we do about 1,000 acres of custom work besides what we farm. And one of the guys just insists that it's going to be no-till. And of course I'm thinking, well, this is great because I get to play a no-till with somebody else's checkbook. And surprisingly, it's worked well. He's got a couple farms that I think he still has his confirmation money because he won't spend any money on tile. But it really does work, and so maybe we'll get there someday, but we still have to play with fertilizer placements, so we like the strips for now, but certainly working. For us, as we transition to the strip till, That was in 2014. 2016, we had a very wet fall, and we were concerned about making ruts in the fields and so on because we're not doing tillage to take those back out. So about 25%, maybe 30% of what we farm is pattern tiled. So we hit those fields first and harvested them. And I remember standing in the shop one morning and we're talking about, okay, which is the next field we should go to that might have the best chance to get across, because there was guys burying grain carts and combines. And I had a good friend of mine that farms about 25 miles east of us, and his dad was just convinced in order to grow any crop you had a moldboard plow. So of course they thought we were completely off our rocker. And he called me as we hit that fall and he said, well, we just finished the first 200 acres. And I kept track and we had a chain hooked on something at least 40 times. And of course, I had to share what I thought. Throw that blankety-blank plow away. Well, they have. They've come a little ways, but so anyway, to finish my story, we chose a farm and said, okay, this half of the quarter is pretty good. We'll start there and see how it goes. The end of the story is we harvested everything and never left a track. So we were convinced what we were doing was helping soil structure. As I mentioned in my intro, the physical part of doing this was pretty easy. The mental part and all the things you heard from neighbors, and I'm not a coffee shop guy, but my dad would go to the coffee shop, and I finally had to tell him, don't come out here and tell us what you're hearing because it's all negative. But we were proving to ourselves that it would work. And another neighbor that he and his boys farm, 12, 15,000 acres. And he stopped in the yard. I'm on the sugar beet board, our local co-op, and he was too, so we spent a lot of time together. And he drove on the yard one day and he said, just don't even try it. This is not going to work. Don't even try it. And I said, Charlie, why isn't it going to work? Well, he said, what are you going to do in a wet spring? I said, I'm just going to go out there and plant because it won't have any wheel compaction. What are you going to do? Well, I suppose I'll have to drag my 60-foot field cultivator across there and mud it up. I said, that's my point. Well, it's not going to work. He's actually using some cereal rye and he's made some changes in his operation, but we have, I think I skipped over it, but our area, there's a lot of big farmers. We're bigger than average. I would say the average size is 1,500, maybe 2,000 acres, but we got some 10, 15, 20, 30,000 acre guys. We have 3 brothers that used to farm together and now split up and probably farm 50,000 acres total. So it's 54-row planters, 48-row planters, 36-row planters. It's big stuff and it's fast. Before we made this transition, because we ran a lot of land, I was concerned about, is this going to kick me off some farms? You know, you got to get along with these people. And we have great people. We have a lot of long-term deals, 20, 30, 40-year deals. And so I went to everyone, and I had my iPad, and I had pictures, and I'm explaining all this, and they all thought it made some sense. And about 3 years after we had made the change, Melvin, he was my oldest guy. He just passed away about a year ago. 92 years old, but he plowed till the day he had the auction when we rented the farm. And he's like, man, I wish I would have known about this a long time ago. This is the way to go. So it's very reassuring to hear those things. It's made farming fun again. I was kind of the point I was getting burned out of just the same thing day after day, and so in about 2002 we actually started a trucking company, and we had 10 trucks running across the country hauling whatever we could, and I kind of focused on that because these 2 guys are so good on the farm, and we weren't farming quite as much then because I needed to be challenged. Well, when this came about, of course, it was a mental challenge, and it kind of got my attention again, so we decided the trucking company could go and we'd have fun farming. So these were the old methods. So when the corn price was really good, we were raising corn and sugar beets. And so we were convinced it had to be black. So we would run that Wishick disc right behind the combine and come right back behind that with a ripper. And we were burning about 4.5 to 5 gallons of fuel per acre just to do our fall tillage. Our strip till rig today, we burn probably 0.6 to 0.8 gallons per acre. So that's doing our fall tillage, our spring tillage, so to say, because we don't do any, we plant into a stale seed bed, and our fertilizer application, so huge savings. When we made this transition, we also had 2 4-wheel drives, we had 2 field cultivators, we had this equipment. So economically, it was pretty easy to sell those things off and justify the cost of the machine and simplify things. We had never done our own fertilizer application. We always called the co-op. That was easy, have them come spread it. Now all of a sudden we have to do that ourselves. It wasn't a problem at all. We were used to tending sprayers and that type thing. So my nephew Chris, he just keeps it rolling, and we just make sure the fertilizer tender is moved to the next field for him. And tillage, we would do 160 acres a day, maybe 200 acres a day. We have a 44-foot, 24-row soil warrior pulling it between 6.5 to 9 miles an hour, depending on the field. So Chris can do 300 to 400 acres a day. These are not my fields, I want to tell you that, but one of our goals in this whole deal is to avoid compaction, and I think we've all seen wheel tracks at some point in a field. Again, the sugar beets, just no residue left. We're trying to figure out a way, and I was hoping some of the sugar beet guys that I met with last night could give me some tips on how to get something started earlier. We've messed around with tried to spread some cereal rye prior to harvest, thinking that the harvest action would maybe speed up that process or even get some growth going, but have been unsuccessful with that. But still looking for a way to get something started sooner. So here is how we started with that fall seeded rye. And to start with, we were saving those acres till spring to strip. So picture on the right is in the spring. So now we have a Salford vertical tillage tool there. We mounted a Hinneker seed box on top of that, so we're spreading about 45 pounds of cereal rye broadcast right ahead of the rolling basket as we make one pass to level the field after the sugar beet harvest. Here's our soil warrior running twin bins, variable rate out of either tank or both at the same time. Chris does prescription maps for us after we get our soil test back from our crop consultant. It's been a heck of a tool for us. It just held up very well across the acres, and haven't figured out how to make it work in water yet, but maybe they're working on that. So this is one of the early years that we were deathly scared of planting into this because we had never done that before. In fact, this field sits on a kind of a main tar road in our area, and had a neighbor friend of mine call me up, and as soon as I answered the phone, he said, "Yeah, my batwings mower is in the shed, go ahead and help yourself." And I said, "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, just go ahead and hook onto that batwing mower and go mow that down." And I still didn't understand what he's talking about. He said, "I just went past your field and there's no way in hell that's going to work." We proved him wrong. Now we're not afraid to do this at all. So here is cereal rye on the far left there that we had stripped, planted the corn. This is probably an extreme picture. I don't think we'd let it get that tall again, but we terminated immediately after planting. So we apply our pre-emerge with some Roundup, and it's easily killed off. And that rye lays down, and of course shades in between the row. I told this story yesterday in a breakout session. A couple years ago, my son, as he's finishing up his pharmacy degree, he and his wife had a chance to intern in Alaska. So we're going to go up there. We've never been to Alaska, so that's a good excuse to go. So we go to visit, and about the time we need to do post-emerge spraying on the corn. And my nephew calls and says, I don't find a weed out there. You sure we need to spray it? Well, yeah, we need to spray it. We've never not done that before, so go ahead and spray it. And looking back now after we've done this for a year or two, we certainly will be cutting back our chemical costs. And that we've had comments from neighbors and co-op type people that'll call and say, what have you done to your corn? Because it looks so much greener than everybody else does. And I think that just comes to plant health and soil biology, so feels good. So we're still kind of on the bubble whether we strip till for soybeans or if we can get cereal rye established in the fall. We love planting straight into that in the spring. There too, we're dicamba soybeans. I really question whether we'd have to spray some of these if we have a good thick stand, because it really holds the weeds back. Yields have been phenomenal. You know, we did have beans out of our rotation for several years, but I think my 5-year average on soybeans is probably 67, 68 bushel beans. So this was an early attempt. Sugar beets, we typically would always put a nurse crop in the spring, either oats or wheat, to help protect that sugar beet seedling as it's first coming out of the ground from wind. And the beets come out and they form a cotyledon leaves, so they become a helicopter. If you get the wind, they just spin off and breaks the stem off, and they die. So we're going to plant beets the first year into 100% strip till into soybean ground, and that's usually what would blow. So we were standing in the yard one day, and we had cereal rye in our fertilizer tender in one bin, and so we decided, well, let's just crack the door and we'll blend a little cereal rye in there and give it a shot. Well, we had no means of measuring what we were doing, and so we just kind of took a guess, and we got it on there plenty thick, but planted beets directly into it in the spring, worked beautiful. We got caught in a rain event. We couldn't get out there to spray it, so then it becomes a weed and competed with the beets a little bit, but we'll know going forward, we'll get it terminated right away, but worked very good. And we've actually got some guys in our area that are looking at doing this for next year, so I'll be curious and try to follow along how it works for them. So then we get the side dressing nitrogen. So that Hinneker seed box you see there is the same box we take off our Salford. We made it interchangeable. We actually worked with the Minnesota corn growers, got a grant to purchase that box because they wanted to see some work done with interseeding. One of the requirements was that we had to have some kind of seed to soil contact. And my pointer's not working. If you look really close behind that coulter, we mounted a drag tooth behind each row. I didn't feel like investing $800 to $1,000 per row to get the nice seeding units that you can do both with, so we thought we'd try this first. We just wanted to move just enough dirt to maybe cover that cover crop seed. So we're broadcasting the seed right ahead of the bar. The coulter's injecting the nitrogen, and we're stirring a little dirt to get over that seed. This rig, we do a bunch of custom work with this thing, so it does about 4,000 to 5,000 acres a year. It's held up very well. So we never have problems getting it established. We've changed our blends of mixes, trying different things, but we've had mixed results with getting it to survive that summer dormancy and actually be there come harvest. I think our 22-inch rows, we shade out so much better, and it just really all seems to be dependent on weather. We've had really good corn with a dense canopy that it survived, and of course the poor corn with a lower canopy, it survived there too, and vice versa. So we're still playing with that. The first year we did this, we had some brassica, large leaf brassicas in there, and one of my co-op guys called me one day and he said, "Didn't you get this field sprayed?" I said, "Well, yeah, I sprayed it. Why?" He said, "Well, there's cockleburrs growing out of the side of the corn." No, that's not. That's cover crop. But ideally, if we could get it established like this in the fall, we'd just leave that and plant beans in it the next spring. I'd love to go to a highboy type cedar. Warren's got me dreaming about after listening to his session yesterday. 22-inch rows, we're a little concerned if we can get up and down those rows without doing a lot of damage. We do it August. I have some friends in southwest Minnesota that are very successful with cereal seeding it that late, so we got to build up the checkbook a little bit before that's going to happen. Just to cover crop plot, we have a field day at our farm every year. We've had from 70 to 125 people come. Unfortunately, the people that come are always from 20 to 100 miles away. The neighbors don't come, but that's all right. Last year when we did this, right next door, we got 400 acres that we've tried to rent from this guy for 20 years, and we just never get the deal done. But he's very conservation-minded. He rents to a cousin of his that's extremely the opposite. They're hog farmers, which is fine. They apply their own manure, but they always tend to be 3 to 5 days early when they should be out there. So last year for this field day, I had bought a penetrometer like somebody showed in a presentation yesterday, and so I just randomly went out like 5 places in our field right across the road from his and watched that penetrometer meter, and it never went out of the green. I could shove it to the handle. So I was really pleased with what we were doing. So I walked across into his, and there wasn't any place I could get it more than 6 inches without pegging it. And I didn't want to break this thing because I just paid a couple $100 for it. So I thought, wow, we're really doing the right thing, and obviously what we're seeing them do is not beneficial to their field. So I thought, well, how do I put a spin on this? And this guy's coming to my field day the next day, this landowner, but I don't want to say something negative about his family or the people that are farming his land. So I went back home, grabbed a spade, went out there and dug down 6 inches in my field and put it into a pail. Went into his and bounced on it a few times to get the shovel in and get this big chunk, and I put it in a pail. And so the next day he came, and amongst all the other people, and part of our discussion, we're going to look at the aggregation of these 2 buckets. And he had seen this prior to us getting started, so I had the chance to have this conversation. And I said, well, Wayne, let me tell you, I said, this bucket is of the nice stuff is from our farm, and I'm not going to share it with everybody else, but that bucket's from your farm. And his eyes got huge. And so he's really having a tough time still renting to his family, his cousins, but we'll see if we can get the job done by convincing him of some of those things. Water infiltration. You don't fix this with cover crops. This happened to be at a sugar beet field, and we knew we were going to get a big rain one night, and this is our push tractor for pushing trucks, and I'm the guy that parked it in the wrong spot, so with hip boots on, I went and retrieved it. But this is how we're trying to fix water infiltration on a lot of farms. We bought our own tile plow a couple years ago, just trying to find a window in the wet seasons we've had. We always want to do it in the fall. Fall hasn't allowed us to do that, so we're looking now at bringing some wheat into the rotation. I like what I hear about just a different crop in the rotation, and it's in our area we don't raise very good wheat at all. Quality is always poor, so it's probably a loser crop for us, but if it would allow us to get some tile put in and we get some manure on there and some cover crops, so it would set us up for the next year. And I've heard really good things about the following crop after wheat all the time. In fact, a couple guys that raise sugar beets near us in our co-op talk from probably on average 4 to 6 ton better. This past year, the one guy actually had 14 ton better on a side-by-side with corn stalks. So, we can take a hit one year because hopefully we're in this business for more than 1 year at a time. So we're looking at that. So this is just a picture of the corn coming up in our strips on soybean ground, and to me there's nothing prettier. That ground is so beautiful to plant into, so nice and mellow into that stale seed bed. I just think it's a no-brainer, and we try to convince more people of it that are following us closer, and just to give it a try, and it's worked very, very well for us. So we're only applying P and K in the fall in our strips. I'm part of the CSP program, and that's one of the requirements in what I signed up for, and so then we're handling nitrogen as 32% in several passes in the spring, but very happy with it. These are sugar beets in the strip. So on the left there you can see what kind of residue we have. We have a nice black strip to plant the beets into. In the fall they look like anything else. When I first was going to do this, I called my fieldman and I said, hey, I'm looking at strip till. What's that? So I had to explain that to him. And I said, what do you think? He said, well, I don't think that's going to work. I said, why isn't it going to work? Well, nobody's done that before. And so supposedly we're the first ones in the state of Minnesota to ever strip till beets, and we won't change a thing. Our soil structure is so much better in the fall. We don't use carts. We don't have self-propelled harvester as you saw before, so our trucks run in the field. We don't have near the issue with carrying the weight and so on. We don't leave deep tracks. So it's worked out very well. We don't have to use a nurse crop anymore because that ground isn't subject to blowing with some residue there. So it saves that pass of Roundup and some dollars. Just a picture of what it looks like in that furrow behind the planter. So we have a 24-row box mounted planter, and we have a 36-row center fill planter. I think you'll see in a couple slides here, but we do not run implement steering on anything. We're pretty flat. I mean, we got what I would call a hill you guys would probably laugh at, but we follow very, very well. So actually our pull type 36-row planter follows that Soil Warrior that's a 24-row better, because if there is any drift it kind of matches because they're both pull type. But we're on the strip all the time. Here's our 36 row. So we're putting 20 gallons of 32% 2x0, so we're dribbling alongside. Now the previous presenter makes me think about that a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't be, but it has worked very well for us. So he's got a 750-gallon tank on the planter, and we carry 1,000 on that tractor, and that plants our corn and soybeans. We haven't made any changes to our planters other than we use I always forget the name, cruisers, a spiked closing wheel. There you go. That's the only change we made. We do have clean sweep trash wheels up front on both planters, but the rest of the planter is just a stock planter. These are strips in the corn in the fall on the left and soybeans on the right. We don't, because we run a triple coulter machine, it's not on a shank, so we don't get a real big mound, but we also don't have any air pocket that it settles that much, so come spring we're about level to the rest of the surface, and it's worked out very well. I threw this in here. We went to a draper head for soybeans this year, and so we had to make some changes because we want to make sure that residue got spread out. So we ended up upgrading a combine to get the power spreader on a John Deere, so that's worked out very well. So here's our corn head. We run an 18-row corn head. Just this last year was our first year. Prior to that, we had a 12-row head, so we started out as we strip-tilled. We ran a chopping head, and we soon found out that we create a mat of residue that we just couldn't seem to move very well with the soil warrior, and we do have clean sweeps on the front of that. So the second year we went, I went to some conferences like this and started to talk to people. Why everybody talked about the Calmer stock rolls, and so we found a conventional head, sold off our chopping head, installed the Calmer stock rolls, and loved them. They were fantastic. They size that residue, they drop it straight down around the corn shank, so even in 22-inch rows, the center of that row is pretty black already before we come with the strip tiller. Takes less power, all those kind of things. So then Brian decides we're going to buy an 18-row, so we find an 18-row conventional head. We get the head, and it has opposing John Deere factory stock rolls on it. So we thought, well, maybe we can get by with that, because when I priced the Calmers, it was going to be $21,000 or something like that. I already blew my budget on buying the head. And so then I had a friend of mine that's been running these Devastators for a couple of years, and so we thought, well, maybe that would help kind of crimp and size and start the decaying process without having to put the Calmers on. When it's dry, they work fantastic. We had stompers on our old head all the way across. What we had found out early in the game too, if we drive down some of the rows and we leave some standing, all the residue that does move ends up in those standing stalks. So they become kind of a snow fence and catch that, and that created problems in the spring. So we either said we got to have them all standing or all flat, and we run 800 metric duals on that combine, so it's going to drive down some rows and narrow rows, so now we got to try and flatten them. This last fall when it was really wet and we struggled with just too much rain, those Devastators would build up with mud, and so they were unbolted and put on the side of the field a couple times. But by next fall, we're going to have Calmers on this thing. So sometimes you got to work in extreme weather. We got caught in a snow event this last fall, and Chris is pretty determined to get across the acres we have, so he was out there and making it work, and as long as it's cold enough, things worked very well. If it starts to get close to thawing at all, it gets to be a mess, so then we stop. So we were able to continue to go. So this was kind of harvest for us. You guys all probably have seen some of this stuff, but sugar beet truck working around potholes and so on, and he tried to go for it and buried that, so we had to push him out. And we had brought in some extra help. It's always tough to find seasonal help. So we got kind of a neat deal. We got into it's a website for RV people to travel the country, living in their RV or just on vacation. And so we actually had 5 people come from all over the United States, came to our farm and worked for us for a month. And so some of them had some truck driving experience, some didn't. This guy actually was an over-the-road truck driver and just got too close to the edge of the road and called me in a panic, wanting to go back to Missouri because this isn't working out. And I said, wait a minute, what happened? And so he shared it with me, and so this happened to be about 20 miles away from where I live, so I go racing down there, and I don't know how that truck stayed up. It should have tipped. It was pretty steep, but we backed it out and pulled it out on the road, and no harm was done, and kind of had to give him a big hug and reassure him that it was going to be okay, and he stuck with us. So. This year we were voted to win the Outstanding Conservationist Award for our county. We've done some other work. We're involved with the Soil Health Partnership. I got a Super Sprout Award from them last year. I have no idea what a Super Sprout is. Been recognized in the Sugar Beet Grower magazine. We are for our advocate, been selected for 2020 out of 5 people in the United States, so we're very humbled to be chosen to be part of that. And continue to do some research with the corn growers. We also do some with University of Minnesota Extension, NDSU, and again, do some plot work and have field days at our place. But kind of turned our farm into a research plot, and we've learned a lot of things from doing that. That's how you find things that work for you and things that don't, I guess. So my message, I guess, to other people is just to try something. I think there's ways you can just dip your toe in the water versus taking a plunge like we did. I've had people comment to me they thought I was just absolutely crazy to jump in with both feet, but you don't purchase that machine for nothing. So when you make a financial commitment, you got to make it work, and we were determined to make it work. So, but there's much simpler ways to do it, whether it's just starting with cover crops or putting together a strip till bar made out of an old cultivator or whatever it might be. But I think the message I like to share with people is that we have to do something different to leave this land better for the next generation, and I'm convinced that there's a better way. I hate to be too vocal about that because you can upset some people, but I think we've all seen that wind erosion, water erosion, what that can do depending on how you farm, and so there's ways to alleviate that. So that's kind of all I got. We do have a website of our own. We have a Facebook page. I am on Twitter. It's kind of fun to share ideas and stay connected with people. Actually finally got to meet a few people at this conference that we bounced ideas back and forth on social media, so that was kind of fun, and would entertain any questions if you have some. So, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Is there any questions out on the floor? There's some coming here.
Question here is, did your yield increase? Yes, I think we could fairly accurately say we've probably seen a 10 to maybe 15% increase over our conventional neighbors. And I think because of what we do, we maybe can lessen the roller coaster effect, take the highs and lows out maybe, and just to be more consistent. I question my banker every time I go to see him, because this day and age you get to have a pretty good relationship with your banker. Just how do we stack up? And you know, our costs, I guess I didn't share that. Our costs, we figure, are $30 to $40 an acre lower. I got to tell you a fuel consumption story. So prior to a major expansion we had just within the last couple of years, we have a 10,000 gallon fuel tank. So every spring I got to transport load in, and every fall we'd end up getting 2. So come the third year in the strip till, second year in the strip till, in the spring I call for a load of fuel. So the guy brings the fuel, and we're working in the shop, and our fuel tank's across the yard, and pretty soon he comes walking over and he says, "We've got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I ran the tank over." Ran the tank over? I said, "We got a 10,000 gallon tank, and you're hauling 7,300 gallons. And then all of a sudden I realized, aha, we didn't use as much fuel last fall. So that was a nice problem to have. Yeah, question on yield. Was there other questions?
Yeah, there's a couple more here.
Okay.
So one I have here is, the Minnesota millennial farmer is teaching kids that the only way to raise a crop on black soil is to till fall and spring. That opinion is present here in Ontario as well. How do we counter this?
To till in the spring? Is that what
It says the millennial farmer is teaching that we have to raise a crop, has to be black soil, tilled in the fall and the spring. He says, you know, that's certainly something that feels in Ontario as well. So how do we counter that opinion?
Yeah, that's a tough one. He actually was the moderator I wasn't at the conference, but he was a moderator at a conference in like a strip till, no-till conference, and caught a lot of flack about that because he's not sharing those practices. And, you know, what he's doing, I think, is a great deal. He's educated a lot of non-farming people in his YouTube videos and that type of thing, but maybe I got to visit with him.
It's fair. If that works, come back here for us too. Okay. Have you tried 44-inch corn versus 60-inch corn, that type of thing?
We haven't. I'm getting some pressure from the guy that got it started in the cover crop seed, but he's a cattle guy, so not only does he want me to do 44-inch corn, he wants me to put cattle on a quarter, and all I know about cows is I like to eat them, so I don't know that I want to go that route. But I think there's something there. I would have more faith in a 44 versus a 60, just because you're narrowing that up. This guy actually had called me last week, and he's got eyes on trying to rent a farm. He's got a doctor lady that inherited a farm and wants it done. She wants cover crop, she wants cattle, you know, regenerative type agriculture, and he has no equipment. He just sells seed and has a consulting business. So there again, we might get to play on somebody else's dime.
That's good. Well, thanks. I think that's the questions for now. There may be an opportunity later in the breakout group or over the break. Join me in thanking Brian.
Thank you.
So again, it's a time to give people a few, I guess, items ahead of time here. So we're going to go to the break here. It's going to run till 11 o'clock in the atrium. Reminder to check out your hotel room if you need to. After the break, we start in the breakout sessions. So the first one's going to start at 11, and that'll give you the choice of the following 6 topics. In here will be Livestock Accelerate Soil Restoration with Michael Thompson. Around the corner on the right-hand side, room 2, 60-inch corn, thinking outside the row.